على محمد وأهل بيته الطاهرين. Respected viewers, honorable guests of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in this holy month of Ramadan from all corners of the world. Salamun alaykum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Welcome to today's or tonight's program, depending on which part of the world you are. On this very important program, The Final Journey, a religious, medical, and practical perspective for COVID-19 burial procedures. Whilst this program may interest many who are involved in the Ghusl, Kafan, and the Dafan committees of mosques and Imam Baras and Jamaats globally, I am sure that many of us are also as individuals interested to learn as to what would happen in the unfortunate event of a corona death, either for myself, God forbid, or for any near and dear ones, or for that matter, for our community members. We are living in unprecedented times where every convention of normal life is being challenged. In fact, death and post-death conventions have also been challenged. During these times of anxiety, it is our iman and our faith that makes us understand that we need to pass through this test and imtihan from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala with flying colors. One such uncertainty is dying during the pandemic. What happens if we die? Will I or my near and dear ones or my friends get a normal burial according to Sharia? Or will I have to miss ghusl or tayammum or kafan for that matter? These are questions that we want to explore tonight with a very learned and diverse panel that represent global communities that have come today with us here, alhamdulillah. So before I introduce them, let us bless our program this evening with the recitation of the Holy Quran. And it is my pleasure to invite Qari Muallim Murtaza Bhai Bandali to bless our program with the recitation of a few verses of the Holy Quran. Qari Murtaza Bandali, falyatafaddal. Shukran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون واعتصموا بحبل الله جميعا ولا تفرقوا واذكروا نعمة الله عليكم إذ كنتم أعداء فألف بين قلوبكم فأصبحتم بنعمته إخوانا وكنتم على شفا حفرة من النار فأنقذكم منها كذلك يبين الله لكم آياته لعلكم تهتدون ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ولتكن منكم أمة يدعون إلى الخير ويأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر وأولئك هم المفلحون ولا تكونوا كالذين تفرقوا واختلفوا من بعد ما جاءهم البينات وأولئك لهم عذاب عظيم يوم تبيض وجوه وتسود وجوه فأما الذين اسودت وجوههم أكفرتم بعد إيمانكم فذوقوا العذاب بما كنتم تكفرون وأما الذين ابيضت وجوههم ففي رحمة الله هم فيها خالدون تلك آيات الله نتلوها عليك بالحق وما الله يريد ظلما للعالمين ولله ما في السماوات وما في الأرض وإلى الله ترجع الأمور صدق الله العلي العظيم اللهم صل وسلم وزد وبارك على رسول الله وآله الأطهار على رسول الله وآله الأطهار اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Ahsantum, طيب الله فاسد. Thank you so much for lifting our souls for our session, inshallah, today. Ahsantum, jazakallah. With that, beautiful verses from the Holy Quran, we commence the program. A very quick preamble as I introduce our guests this evening, that early February, when the World Federation saw that the pandemic that had reached its peak in China and Iran was moving towards Europe, where the epicenter was about to unfold in March, a COVID-19 task force was set up. And one of the early things that happened was a series of questions was sent to His Eminence, Ayatollah al-Udama, Sayyid Ali Husseini As-Sistani Najafi Ashraf, a range of questions about COVID-19, about social distancing, about masails of Salat Jamaat, about opening and closing of centers, about the attitudes of Mu'mineen. But at the same time, there were a number of questions about in the unfortunate event of that, or what does one do? Is it ghusl? Is it tayammum? Is it kafan? What are the shari'i requirements? And what is interesting in the series of 20 questions, His Eminence talked about the importance of medical profession and the need to refer to doctors at least 3 times. And that in itself tells us that we are living in uncharted waters where a number of things about this pandemic is unknown. And that is why in today's panel, we have 5 doctors with profound experiences in different parts of the world who have kindly agreed to be with us. And at the same time, we have 2 alims. Sheikh Murtaza Ali Dina, the head of the Islamic education, needs no introduction, and Sayyid Muhammad Radawi, who is very well known and again needs no introduction. Suffice to say that his experiences globally and in particular North America and Canada is profound, and hopefully we will be asking him a series of questions this evening. Together with that, we have a wide variety of doctors from different parts of the world. Dr. Akbar Mithani, who not only heads the World Federation's COVID-19 task force, but is also a leading frontline doctor dealing with deadly cases of death in British Columbia, as he's in charge of some of the large, the long-term care facilities for the most vulnerable who are impacted most by this crisis. We also have with us Dr. Sukaina Hirji, a practicing general practitioner in UK working with the NHS, and has been involved actively with the Ladies Ghusl Kafan Committee in Stanmore Hujjat Jamaat since the start of the pandemic. We have with us tonight Dr. Shahnaz Sharif, the Chief Executive Officer of Jaffrey Medical Center, Mombasa, Kenya, who has served as a public health expert and a Director of Public Health Sanitation Duties in Kenya. He has been involved in many pandemics in the past in Kenya, and hopefully will be giving us an insight from the East African perspective. But he also advises the Jamaat in Mombasa as far as Ghusl Kafan Dafan is concerned. And then we have from Pakistan, Dr. Hussein Kanani, the Chief Executive Officer of Fatimiyya Hospital, Karachi, a very active member of the Pirai Jamaat. And they also have provided guidelines to community members in Karachi. And last but not least, we are pleased to have with us Dr. Munir Datu, who not only heads the medical team at the World Federation, but is the president of Stanmore Jamaat. And probably today, the largest number of corona cases that are being dealt on a daily basis as far as Ghusl Kafan Dafan is concerned is the Stanmore Jamaat. So he is representing Hujjat tonight and will be giving the practical perspective of what's happening on the ground. So we hopefully want to cover all the different ranges of the subject this evening, the spiritual component, the health advice that we have from public practitioners, as well as the practical provisions on the ground through the Ghusl Kafan committees. So without further ado, the World Federation has produced a series of guidelines. The first guideline was produced earlier in March. Then there was a revision to the guidelines in line with the guidance from Sayyid Sistani, and following further advice from His Eminence and updates from medical practitioners, the medical and religious guidelines on the transportation and the handling of dead bodies, the mayyat infected with COVID-19, was published only a few days ago on the 22nd of April. So without further ado, I will invite Sheikh Murtaza Ali Dina to provide us a summary of the options that have been provided from a Sharia perspective in the guidelines that have been published recently. Sheikh Murtaza Ali Dina.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا محمد وآله الطاهرين. Respected scholar, the honorable physicians, Qari Sahib and Mullah Safdarbhai, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. I would like to start off from the verse that the Honorable Qari recited for us to set the tone for this whole discussion. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, all those who believe, ittaqullaha haqqa tuqatih, you should be God-wary and God-conscious of your duty towards God. Haqqa tuqatih, in the best manner possible, which is worthy of Him. In all fields, in all areas, you should obey His command. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ, and you should continue to be God-wary and God-conscious in all areas of your life up until your death time. And therefore, following from this, it was our duty to be able to get the necessary guidelines from our marja of how to deal with these new situations that were beginning to face us. So the ayah says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا, collectively, all together, in cooperation, you should hold on to the book of God, to the rope of God, which is the book of God as explained and applied by the Holy Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam from the teachings of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa alihi. And therefore, in our times, we refer to the marja for guidelines of how to handle the dead body infected with this coronavirus in order to prepare it and observing the necessary conditions for the validity of this act of ibadah. Interesting, as Mullah Safdar has pointed out, the emphasis of all the maraji and Hazrat Ayatollah Sistani, may Allah protect all our ulama, the emphasis was that in these conditions, you must refer to the medical experts to give you the guidelines of what are the necessary medical precautions to be taken. And the practice of any of the burial rituals, be it the ghusl and be it the kafan, be it the hanut, be it the salatul mayyit, be it the dafn, any of these, if they violate any of the necessary precautions, medical precautions, then they will change accordingly. So based on these guidelines, the WF issued, and in consultation with the medical experts, after inquiring the different conditions and circumstances in different parts of the world where our community has spread over, we have issued these 5 options. So if in a community a situation arises where the medical experts and the government health authority allows, with the necessary medical precautions, that ghusl can be performed on the mayyit, and the ghusl kafan committee can procure the necessary protection gear and can don it and doff it and use it in a proper way, in such a way that there is no harm, substantial harm, to the person themselves or to others in the community, then it is wajib that ghusl must be performed, and subsequently all the other rituals after ghusl, which is the kafan and the hanut and the salatul mayyit and the dafn. The second scenario, there are some places, some communities where the government authorities or the medical experts do not allow or advise that the body bag in which the infected corona patient corpse has been placed, the body bag can be opened. It can be opened, but to the minimal extent, which can only allow tayammum to be performed. So in that situation, then ghusl will not apply. It's no longer wajib. It's just like in the living person, if for different situations water is not available, or it's available but it is not accessible, or it's accessible but it's not usable because it is either ghasbi or it's because for health reasons, then ghusl or wudu is no longer wajib. Instead of that, tayammum becomes wajib for the living. Likewise for the deceased. If the medical authorities or the government health authorities don't allow the full opening of the body bag, then the duty of the Ghusl Kafan Committee shifts to performing tayammum. And to the extent that the authorities allow, the hanut on the 7 parts should be performed, or if they don't allow, then Agha allows hanut not on the 7 parts of the sajda, but even 3 parts on which the tayammum will be performed, the forehead and the 2 palms. Hanut is enough on that. And after kafan and salatul mayyit, then burial can be performed. A third scenario where the medical authorities or the government authorities don't even allow the opening of the body bag in which the corona infected case has been given to the community. In that case, ghusl is definitely not wajib. But the big question was, is tayammum now wajib on top of the closed, unzipped body bag? So here, the guidance we received from the marja, Hazrat Ayla Sistani Hafidhahullah, was that yes, in this situation, tayammum should be done on top of the closed, zipped body bag. But of course, the individuals will, the Ghusl Kafan Committee volunteers will have to try to identify where are the tayammum parts of the mayyit, either by visualization or by touching, or even by applying pressure of the body bag on the underlying body parts. And the tayammum can be done. God forbid if the body bag is of a thick nature or texture, or it's of a nature that simply doesn't allow the detection and the identification of the tayammum parts of the mayyit, then even in this case, tayammum is no longer wajib. The fourth case scenario was a situation where the medical experts and or the government health authorities don't even allow access to the mayyit in the body bag, so that even the tayammum could be performed on top of the body bag. Well, in this situation, even tayammum is no longer wajib. If they allow, then kafan at least should be applied on top of the body bag. And of course, salatul mayyit and dafn. And finally, the worst case scenario where, God forbid, the government or health authorities deem it extremely important that they totally dispose of the body. So the Ghusl Kafan Committee or the members of the community are not given any access to the body bag and to the mayyit. Straight away, the mayyit is taken for burial. So neither Ghusl nor Kafan nor Hanut will be possible. In case if they do allow Salatul Mayyit and prayers for the deceased. Inshallah, if we follow these rules, we hope that we have done our duty and not failed. The essence of all of these actions is that we give a dignified, respectable, last moment rites to the deceased, whatever is possible. But ultimately, it is our dua for istighfar of the mayyit, tawassul of the Ahlul Bayt alayhimus salam, that will deliver this mayyit into the next world, into the safe hands, and for maghfirah and shafa'ah, inshaAllah. Ahsantum.
Ahsantum, Shaykhna. Dignified, respectful rights to the mayyit. Dr. Mithani, the guidelines that were put together by the task force was a combination of the ulama from the Islamic education and the Maraj's guidance together with the doctors. So can you please provide the risk assessment component of the guidelines for the viewers?
A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Thank you, Sheikh Safdar. Risk assessment has 3 major areas that you have to focus on. The first area of risk assessment is around making sure that you have extensive consultation with your local health authority and the local medical professionals that are involved. And that is to make sure that there is proper protection for yourself from the infection. But more importantly, even if you're able to protect yourself, you have to understand that you could be a carrier and actually be a vector or a means by which you would be infecting others. So it's not just about your own personal protection, it's about making sure that you do not become the means of transmitting this virus in the community and in the society. So that's a very important part where local health professional needs to be involved. We still have very many unknowns about this virus. We don't know a lot about this virus. And in fact, if you look at some of the guidelines, I know some people will quote, this is what the WHO guideline says around burial and ghusl and all of this. All of these are based currently on the experience we have with influenza. We just don't have enough experience with this particular virus, and we are learning all the time. And so risk assessment becomes very important in that situation. The other important thing is to make sure that even if you have everything in place, the proper donning and doffing of the PPE, even by professionals right now, the studies are showing that even by professionals, it can be problematic. In fact, the studies in ICU show that physicians who don and doff and healthcare professionals who don and doff, there is still opportunity for people to actually contaminate themselves and get infected, because it's not an easy process to carry out the donning and doffing. It involves a very meticulous infection control measures that one has to take. So it's very important to understand that as part of the risk assessment as well. The other area of risk assessment is looking at what are the realities of the actual community center or the ghusl kafan environment. Is there direct access where there is a very separate access to the ghusl kafan area? Or is the access to the ghusl kafan area through the community center? It makes a very big difference, because then when you start to consider the pre and post disinfection, you would have to understand that you're not only disinfecting one area, but now you have potentially introduced the virus even into the community center, because the body's access has gone through the community center. The other part of this is that, do you have in your community, local medical health professionals that can really advise you specifically around some of these infection control measures? And do you have reputable, informed Islamic scholars that can also inform you around what you can and cannot do? And the final area really is to understand the reality of the process, right? The ghusl process, for example, is not an easy process, right? There are 4 washes, right? There is a wash of taharat, and then there is the pre-wajib ghusl. And so you need to understand what is, and there is evidence that the splashing process does pose a higher risk of this virus. The body may have certain secretions. Sometimes the body comes, if it's been in ICU, it comes with an endotracheal, a tube already from the lung that the ghusl kafan committee has to take out, and that is where the virus load is very high. So all of those things have to be taken into account. What is the capacity and the resources of the organization? Are you confident that as an organization you will be able to implement this very stringent infection control measures with donning, doffing, all of those things, and you should be absolutely confident that you will be able to protect yourself, most importantly also protect community transmission before you go for the option of ghusl. Otherwise, you have this liability and culpability even from a Shari'i perspective. So all of these factors need to be taken into place in doing a very thorough risk assessment. And my recommendation really is to fully engage your local medical health professionals in helping you to make those assessments before making a decision.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Bitani. I think the way you have summarized the check and balance, Sharia allows the 5 steps, and these are the assessments required, and strongly involving the local health experts. And this brings us nicely to the next part of our discussion now, is where I would like to bring in experts from different regions to provide us a local ground reality perspective, both from the law of the land to what is practical in terms of the legalities and what the local health authorities and yourselves as doctors on the ground feel as far as the current situation is concerned. So I'll probably start with United Kingdom and Dr. Sukaina. If you can summarize the local health authority guidelines in United Kingdom and your perspective and understanding of those issues.
Thank you very much, Sheikh Safdar. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. So in the United Kingdom, we have two authorities that have provided guidance on handling of the mayat. And the main authority is Public Health England, but we have also received guidance from the Royal College of Pathologists. Now, both of these authorities have provided guidance based on all the evidence that is currently available to them. And what they have both stated is that the risk of contracting COVID-19 from a deceased mayat is significantly less than it is from catching it from someone who is alive and has the infection at present. However, that doesn't mean that there is no risk. There is still some level of risk involved. And there are two sources from which this risk emanates from. So the first is from the actual lungs of the mayat. So it is possible that during the moving and handling of the body that does take place during the ghusl kafan process, that some air can be expelled from the lungs. And that is potentially where the virus still can be. So of course, there are precautions that can be taken place to ensure that that doesn't happen. For example, by putting a mask on the mayat as soon as it arrives in your premises. The second source of the risk comes from the actual virus that can still be present on the surface of the body of the mayat, and also from the fluids that can be released from the mayat as well. So taking into account those two sources of infection, the Public Health England and the Royal College of Pathologists have advised that it is safe to carry out the washing and shrouding of the body in line with religious beliefs, as long as all the people involved are wearing the correct personal protective equipment and have been trained to do so in the correct manner, and that all the infection control measures that they have stipulated are put in place. So as long as that can happen, then it can be done. And this is in line with what the European Centre for Disease and Prevention Control has also advised, and also what the World Health Organization has also advised. So in terms of managing the actual ghusl process and ensuring that the volunteers in the Ghusl Kafan Committee are fully protected, one of the things that we have done locally in Istanbul Jamaat is implement a buddy system. And this buddy system is essentially where we have a healthcare professional who is there and is fully trained in the PPE and is fully aware of all the infection control measures that need to be taken place. And they monitor the whole process from the minute the mayat enters the building, from the ghusl kafan volunteers putting on their protective equipment, the actual ghusl process itself, and then at the end where the personal protective equipment has to be removed by the volunteers. And this buddy also does not actively take part in the ghusl process because their role is to just stand back and observe everything and monitor it. So, from being a buddy myself in Istanbul Jamaat and from actually being involved in this, we feel that we have managed to keep the risk as low as possible for ghusl to take place, which is in line with the UK government's guidance. So I believe that later on, Dr. Datu, who is the president of Istanbul Jamaat, will elaborate further on the process that has been taken place in Istanbul Jamaat.
Yeah, we will talk about the practicalities later on, absolutely. But I mean, before I move on to Dr. Kanani, just a quick point here is, what about the other European countries? Because we understand from the communities in France, for example, where they are much more stricter and do not even allow the opening of the body bag. So I presume there is diversity of opinion within Europe, or is there a consistent policy across the European Union?
I don't believe that there is a consistent policy as yet throughout the EU. The European Centre for Disease Prevention has issued the guidance saying that it is possible for the ghusl and kafan to take place. However, different governments have decided to take on their own risk assessment and implement their own policies locally.
Okay. Okay. So I'll come to Pakistan. Thank you, Dr. Sukaid. I appreciate it. Dr. Kanani, from a Pakistani legal perspective and a practitioner's perspective, what are the ground considerations right now as far as the health authorities are concerned? You are on mute. You may have to unmute. Thanks. Fine. Whilst you're figuring out that, I probably will move to East Africa and bring in Dr. Shanaz. Dr. Shanaz, maybe you can provide us an East African perspective of the realities.
Okay, I have some slides, two of them, if they can come on TV.
Okay.
Can you see the slides? Okay. Okay, let me sort of give you basically two slides. It talks about the context of the infection and our past experiences with outbreaks of Rift Valley fever, cholera, etc., and potential threats of viral hemorrhagic fevers, which are common in the neighboring countries here, like Ebola, yellow fever. And Kenya has a very good surveillance systems for hemorrhagic fever. So a lot of experience in managing hemorrhagic fevers, right? And good experience in managing outbreaks of hemorrhagic fevers. A lot of Kenyan doctors went to West Africa when they had an outbreak of Ebola. So a lot of lessons were learned during those outbreaks and outbreaks in Kenya. Now, what would happen is that there would be a death, and then the next thing is there would be a cluster of deaths after a funeral, right? And that is because nobody observed proper infectious prevention measures before burial, during burial, and after the burial, right? There would be feasting after burial, right? So a cluster of deaths after a burial, right? Especially in West Africa, and even in Kenya after an outbreak of cholera. Now, Kenya is a very heterogeneous country with 40 different tribes. All of them have different customs, burial customs, right? And in most cases, a burial would be a village affair, right? It's not just one family which is involved. Thus, Kenya has regulations in place in case of infectious diseases which may be transmitted during the burial. There is a WHO statement that COVID transmission from the dead, there is no risk of transmission, right? However, the experts in the Ministry of Health have actually said that there is a potential risk, and thus there are guidelines which have already been published and gazetted as law in Kenya. So the guidelines for burial for COVID-19 is in line with the WHO protocols, and what governs us all is a Public Health Act and laws of Kenya and waste management and other acts of the Ministry of Health. Deaths related to COVID-19 should be certified as such, whether the laboratory diagnosis was confirmed or presumed, right, based on clinical history. And then the circumstances should be indicated. If death is suspected, then a swab should be taken, right? But that patient would be treated as COVID-19 death. Now, guidelines are very clear. We should be very sensitive to local traditions, religion, and culture, right? But they are very stringent in the sense there is double bagging. It's not just one bag, it's two bags, and they should be zipped. Once the bag is zipped, nobody is allowed to open it. So a question of ghusl is automatically out, and burial should be done under supervision of health authorities, right? and safe disposal of the PPE and the other waste material which come from the burial process should all be discarded under the authorities of the local, under the supervision of the local health authorities. So government of Kenya plays it safe, double bagging, zip, end of the matter. And I do not blame it because, as I said, it's a huge country, there are 40 different methods of burying, but the law is one. So it has made no exceptions for religion or tribal, etc. It is being sensitive culturally, but not at the risk of public health or getting infection spread out to the others. Two basic scenarios would be a death in a hospital. If it's a death in a hospital, the hospital would bag the body for you. If it's death at a home, then it is our committee, Ghusl committee, which would go and collect the body. And that would be done with full PPE and disinfecting the environment he was found in, etc. So all those guidelines are there, published in a booklet form for everybody.
Very much, as you have been talking and others, we have been inundated with questions. We've got questions that are pouring in, and one of them is related to East Africa as well. I'll probably come back to that later. And that being that if the government is respecting the different cultures and customs, is the decision taken right now based on sound health advice, or is it kind of a conservative approach to its decision? Whether you want to answer that now or later, it's your choice.
I'll do it later.
Okay, fine. You think about it. I'll come to Hussein Bhai. Dr. Kanani, are you okay now? Can you bring the Pakistani perspective?
Yes. Can you hear me, please?
Yes, perfect. Go ahead.
Well, by listening to whatever other people have said, the laws are not very much strict over here. And we are only required to notify the health authorities whenever a death, COVID positive death happens. Another problem and limitation with us that access to COVID test is very, very limited. And they do not allow us to get a dead body's COVID test. And so what we are doing right now is, irrespective of whether it's known or not known, whether the person who has died is COVID positive or not, we are following all the precautions right now. And all the ghusl and kafan is done by the team of volunteers. What we have to do is, if it's a confirmed COVID positive, we have to notify the health authorities, and everything is to be done then under their supervision. But they do hand over the body to us, and they just supervise that we are following all the guidelines as provided by the government of Pakistan, and we have provided our guidelines to the ghusl and kafan committees, and we have trained them on this subject, and they are then called and they do the entire process of ghusl and kafan in this part of the world.
So are you saying that the risk assessment is done more locally rather than government oriented? Because I know the government of Pakistan also is allowing Taraweeh prayers, for example, in the mosque. So is it that the health authorities in Pakistan have devolved that responsibility, or is it the risk assessment has to happen at the Jamaat level?
Well, the Taraweehs have been banned at the moment. Okay. And night before Ramzan, they announced that congregational prayers in mosques not be allowed, and they changed their decision. But regarding the mayyat and the funeral, this is the law of the land. But we are only required to notify the health authorities in case it is a confirmed COVID positive death. But since we haven't as yet received any dead body with COVID positive, so we are following, for our protection, for our safety, all the ghusl kafan according to the guidelines, as if the dead body is COVID positive.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanani. Let's move on to North America and Canada. Dr. Mithani, can you summarize for us the local health authority perspectives in both US and Canada, if you can cover both jurisdictions?
Yeah, the problem with US and Canada is that the local health authority perspective is actually decentralized, either to the various states or to the provinces. So there is not a federal governmental direction. So it's very much decentralized. In general, there are two principles. Certainly in many parts of the United States, the situation is very clearly that they will, when the person passes away, they will put the mayyat in a body bag. It will be sealed, and you will not be even allowed to open it. And that is the case certainly in those really highly infectious places in the US. Some of the other health authorities, local health authorities, will allow you to have the bag and do the appropriate burial guidelines and rituals according to your faith and your culture. In Canada, it's a similar situation. In most cases, you will receive the body in a body bag, and to allow you to carry out your rituals in the way that you feel is appropriate. However, there are two issues that are very key to understand as far as the advice is concerned here. And one is around the fact that even if you were to receive the body, you will most likely receive it in a body bag. Even if you were to receive a body, you are asked to carry out that risk assessment yourself. But there are many areas where the local health authority has, very clearly cautioned the various organizations and jamaats and communities. If you look at, for example, the Ontario Bereavement Authority has got some very clear caution around washing and splashing and being very careful that it may be a means of transmission and so on and so forth. The other important issue, which I don't think people think about so much, is the availability of the personal protective equipment. And the local health authorities are very sensitive about this. When we talk to them about the ghusl and we say we need 3 or 4 people who are actually going to carry out this ghusl with proper PPE equipment, their concern is around 2 things. Do you really know how to don and doff the equipment? Because that's a problem even in frontline health workers. And number 2, they are very politely saying to us that please be aware of the fact that we have shortages of personal protective equipment for the frontline workers who are saving lives. And now we are using these personal protective equipment for people who have passed away. So if there are other options, you should really seriously consider those and save the personal protective equipment for the frontline workers who are actually saving lives. So it's not a law. It's not something that they are forcing us, but they are very clearly asking us to be aware of that and do our own due diligence with moral and ethical considerations and make decisions in accordance. So when you're doing the risk assessment, that also becomes part of your risk assessment in North America.
Yeah, I think you raised a very important question, which I'll probably bring it to the ulama later on in the program in terms of if there's a PPE shortage, what's the priority, saving a living life or allowing the Ghusl Kafan committee to use it to bury the dead. But I'll probably now come to Maulana now. This might be the right time to bring in Maulana. Maulana, the diversity is there. You have Kenya in East Africa. They don't even allow the opening of the body bag, and hence even tayammum becomes very difficult, if not impossible. Then you have United Kingdom and the WHO that allows it under certain conditions of PPE gear, including Pakistan. And then you have probably some middle ground where you probably can do something. So Maulana, from a Sharia perspective, from the guidelines from his eminence Sayyid Sistani, what is the role of the wali and the guardian who is responsible for the ghusl, kafan, dafan, and you can contextualize based on North America and Canada as well as globally.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah rabbil alameen. I think let me put this in a broader perspective to understand that there is something known as fatwa. A mujtahid gives a ruling about an issue. Then there is something which is known as tatbiq of the fatwa or tashkhis mawdu, applying the fatwa in a given situation. Now, the marja or the mujtahid's responsibility is to give the overall fatwa or guidelines. How it's to be applied locally, this is where they would say that either you do the assessment yourself or you refer to the experts. And we see, for example, in the guidelines from almost all the maraji, the emphasis has been, because coronavirus is a new phenomenon, even the scientists and the medical profession is still studying it more, new things are coming up about it. And so there is a need to refer to the experts. So we have the guidelines which are clear. If it is possible to do ghusl, you do ghusl. If it is not possible, you do tayammum. If it's not possible to do tayammum, then this obligation of ghusl and tayammum are suspended. So that is the fatwa. And so now we come to the local level, whether it is in Karachi or in London or in New York and Toronto, we then have to refer to the experts, what they are saying. If there was one unanimous opinion across the globe, things would have been much easier. You can just give one directive to all the communities how to handle this situation. But since we see, even in the statement which came from Dr. Mithani earlier, if, for example, in US and Canada, it's a state or provincial jurisdiction, health issues. We looked at the statement even from Dr. Hirji, if I got her name correct there, that even in European Union, it's not necessarily, unanimity is not there. Governments still make their own decisions on issues. And so this is where it becomes difficult for us. And the only thing I would say that every, Jamaat or, group and the organization should look at their own local experts, official health officials, as well as the medical experts within the community, consult and find out their view and follow what they are saying in your own local area. So, for example, in England, I see the understanding of the experts is kind of more relaxed, in a sense. If you are able to have the PPE and take the precautions, then you can do ghusl. Whereas if you look at Canada and US, situation is not exactly the same. It seems the opinions are not same there, especially even if you look at the guidelines from Ontario Health Ministry. When splashing, they on one hand they say handling the dead body is not that much a risky issue, but when splashing would happen, that is where they say that the risk would be higher, and that is where we have to look at, and of course we need to consult the doctors, especially in community here in Toronto. We have those who even work in the emergency departments, and they are looking at cases of COVID-19. And so we have to then follow the local government regulations, as well as the local medical experts, even within the community. And so that diversity would be there. And I don't think we can have a blanket, decision on this issue. So, for example, the ulama in London issued this directive saying that it is wajib to do ghusl. They were looking at the experts in their own local area. although we haven't seen really much documentation for it, but we trust them in that way. And that was their assessment. That was تطبيق or تشخيص موضوع. So the fatwa is still there, and they applied it in that way that, ghusl is possible without putting the ghassal and the funeral committee at risk. So it is wajib. Now, if another jurisdiction, looks at the experts in their own area and they see that the risk is higher, they also would be right in making that decision that no, we will take precaution and go to a second level, for example, doing tayammum on the body or on the body bag. So this diversity or of your applying the fatwa on a local area is something people should keep in their minds.
If within a locality there are differing opinions, then what happens? What is the role of the guardian?
Well, I think the way our community, especially in the western part of the world, functions is that the wali does not really actively fulfill this duty, although primarily it is the wali of the mayyit who has this obligation of doing the ghusl and kafan and namaz and dafn, everything. If they don't do it, then the community collectively is responsible. So this is where the issue of wajib kifaya comes in. Normally, the wali would not be in the position to make that decision, or even the assessment of risk level. And this is where the organizations then are given that responsibility. And so I think it is more the organizations, the anjumans, the jamaats, and the centers who take up this responsibility, and their policy has to be uniform. It can't be for one case they would allow it, in another case they would say no.
Thank you very much, Maulana. Before I move now to the practical perspective and bring in Dr. Munir from Stanmore, one very quick, tricky question that has come in. And I said there are so many questions that is important that we try and tackle a few quickly. And this is again a question for the scholars. My question relates to performing ghusl and kafan to a non-COVID marhum. During this pandemic time, we cannot be sure that a non-COVID death is really non-COVID or not. Therefore, in order to safeguard the members of our community, is it allowed to subcontract the ghusl and kafan procedures to Sunni volunteers, brothers and sisters, or is it better to avoid this and do the procedure ourselves? If you can just summarize, this question has come up repeatedly.
I think if it is known to be non-COVID death, then I think we should fulfill the duty of doing the full rituals of the funeral, of course, with all the protections in place for those who are going to handle that process. So I think we should do it ourselves, but if you want to assign that to another Muslim group, we can't give it to non-Muslims. You're talking about a Shia mayyit given to a Sunni, provided it is supervised by a Shia individual so that the ghusl is done according to our fiqh.
Ahsantum, Jazakallah. I'll move now on to the practical perspective, and from our community there have been a few deaths on COVID-19 from the statistics that we have received, largely from United Kingdom, which was the epicenter, remains the epicenter, probably is now moving to US and other parts of the world. And obviously for the Shia population as well, there have been many deaths in Europe. So Dr. Munir, I believe that Stanmore is very active right now. Maybe if you can summarize for us the experiences on the ground in the context of all the risk assessment and Sharia responsibilities that have been understood on the ground.
Thank you, Safdar Bhai. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
So as of today, we have done 60 ghusl at Hujjat Stanmore. The statistics are we have 37 male and 21 female. The two that were done today, I don't know their genders. Of those, 41 were COVID positive and 17 were not positive. The Khoja ghusl that we have done as of today are 12, 9 belonging to Hujja Stanmore, and 2 were from Haidari. The rest are from other communities, Pakistani, Iraqi, Irani, Bohora, Afghani, Lebanese. When we were faced with this situation, we had a discussion with our ghusl committee team. We looked at the guidance that came from the World Federation and His Excellency Ayatollah Uzma Sistani. We looked at his guidance, and we noticed that the guidance was very clear that if ghusl can be performed without any risk to the ghusl giver, then that should be the preference. The ghusl committee in Stanmore themselves were very keen to do proper ghusl. So I requested them to do their due diligence, and they did the diligence, went to Public Health England, spoke to the pathologist department, and Dr. Sukaina Hirji was part of the due diligence as well. And they came to the conclusion that with proper protective equipment, the risks are very minimum. And as Dr. Mithani said as well, that the risk to living is more than, living to living is more than from the dead to living. So even if we were going to do tayammum, they will still be exposed and coming into contact with those doing tayammum, lifting the body, doing the namaz and taking it to the cemetery. So the risk remains whether you do ghusl or tayammum from living to living. The request was for us to provide them with full protective equipment, and that's what we have done. We are lucky in the sense that we have our ghusl khana in the annex, which is separate from the main building, even though the center is closed. But we are cognizant that inshallah, once it opens, there is a need for it to be thoroughly clean. So we are confined to annex. Even in the annex, there are clean area, the ghusl area, and the dirty area. And we are very particular that nobody goes into the clean area except when they are going to do the ghusl. So we have got a room which is assigned for donning, where all the clean PPEs are there. The donning is done there. Then from there they enter to the ghusl khana, where they perform the ghusl on the mayyat. As Sukaina Bai said, that we have got a buddy system where the buddy oversees and make sure there is no breach in the protective equipment. Once the ghusl is over, then the doffing is done as per guidance within the ghusl khana, and they are put in the double yellow bag, which is the infection control bag. We have been doing ghusl for many years, so this is not new for us. We have been doing ghusl on people with hepatitis, with HIV. So we already had those in place, how to dispose them. After ghusl, we have given contract to a cleaning company who comes and professionally clean the ghusl khana, and he is there all the time. It is quite expensive, but it is worth it. We were allowing the family members to come and view the face after ghusl, but we then thought that there was a risk there to the family member as well. So now, once the ghusl is done, the coffin is sealed. We actually screw the coffin and disinfect the coffin from outside. But prior to doing that, the body is turned on the right side. We put a plank of wood and some sand inside the coffin before it is sealed. We have restricted the number of relatives who can come to the cemetery because we need to maintain the social distance of 2 meters. Even then, we keep enough gloves and mask in our hearse and the van so that all family members are wearing those. The risk remains, but the risk from living to living is more than from the dead to the living. I, as a practicing general practitioner, is it more at risk because the PPE that we have been provided is a plastic apron, not the full gown, but just a plastic apron, a mask, and a visor. So, and this is, we are treating live patients. Sukaina Bai is part of the ladies Ghusl team, and she is actively involved in Ghusl. I'm there just for moral support and there for them if they need any help. I haven't done any Ghusl myself, so if you allow me, I can request Sukaina Bai to give us a process inside the Ghusl and how they do it.
Please go ahead, Sukaina Bai.
Thank you. So the way we start is initially we ensure that all the volunteers that are attending are fully well. So we have a check-in process for all the volunteers. Then we have the clean area where they actually put on their personal protective equipment, and I or the other buddies would make sure that it's put on in the correct way with the correct process. And then we all go into the ghusl area. And the 4 volunteers, essentially, they are the ones who will handle the mayat only, but they don't do anything else. So when it comes to even switching on, switching off the taps, giving any dressings or any equipment that is needed by the ghusl volunteers, that is the role of the buddy. And that's to make sure that no contamination from the body is spread from outside the table where the actual ghusl takes place. And then even during the coffin process, we ensure that everything is kept very, very clean. The thing that I forgot to mention is that as soon as we receive the mayat, we ensure the mayat has a mask put on their nose and their mouth as well, just in case there is any air expulsion from the lungs during the process. And that mask is then kept on throughout the process, and even after the coffin has been put on, it's still on the whole time. So that is the way we do it. And then right at the end, the most important part is when the volunteers take off their PPE. And again, we monitor that very, very closely and ensure that it's done very correctly with lots of hand hygiene at every single step. And then the last process we have is that all our volunteers must immediately get changed into clean clothes. And then when they get home, they're not allowed to have any contact with anyone. They must immediately shower and put all their clothes in a 60-degree hot wash. So those are the procedures we have in place. We're very, very stringent with what we do and how we carry this out.
So this is a huge level of risk mitigation that is involved, from what I hear from both of you. And there is a very related question here from a viewer. My question to the panel is, how many ghusls have been given to England? I presume Dr. Munir has already responded to that, 60, at least in Stanmore. Can you please also guarantee us that the volunteers will not catch the virus? Maybe not now, but later after a few weeks. Has there been an assessment of the volunteers who have been repeatedly doing this, and are they quarantined or not? And have you seen any potential challenges over there? Either Dr. Munir or Dr. Sukaina.
Right. The question asking what's going to happen in the future is very difficult to answer. What I can say is, Alhamdulillah, none of the volunteers have yet to contact COVID-19. Having said that, if one of the volunteer was to get symptoms, how do you quantify whether he got it from giving the ghusl where he was in full PPE, or whether he got it from one of the grocery store where he went and he picked up that basket or the tin milk or the bag of tin, or the shopping that he took out at his home, which was packed by the cashier who has been handling with the same glove. Remember, they're wearing the glove and they're not changing gloves between customers. So they're wearing the same gloves, holding on to the grocery. So how do you know that the volunteer who might, I hope not, got the COVID-19, got it from the mayat ghusl he was giving while wearing full PPE, or from outside where he went shopping?
I think you're opening a very challenging Pandora box here in terms of diverse opinions of medical experts. I'll probably bring in...
One second. The reason I'm saying that is because tomorrow if God forbid one of the volunteer gets COVID-19,
Yeah.
then everybody will come with kind of break saying that he got it or she got it from giving ghusl, even though the risk there is minimum. There's a high risk going to the supermarket than coming and giving ghusl.
Sure. Thank you very much. Appreciate that. 60 ghusls, 41 COVID, no cases of corona yet. We pray to Allah that the strength is given. But the important thing that Dr. Mitani alluded to earlier is the risk assessment and making sure that our Jamaats are equipped. It appears Stanmore has all the facilities, the PPE, the disinfection, the company comes in, you throw away the clothes, there is so much going on. I'll probably bring in Dr. Sharif here, from your experience of the committees in different parts of Africa, do you think that level of risk component mitigation is available, or do you feel that there is a risk of doing ghusl as things stand? Obviously, from the law of the land, that is not permissible, but from a more generic perspective, if the law were to allow.
I think if the law were to allow, most of the Jamaats actually have put in measures in place. They have PPEs, and I'm not talking on behalf of other Jamaats, that is Dar es Salaam, but I know they have people who have been trained on how to use PPE. They're experts. For Kenya, it's different. We have been trained on how to don, doff, and everything. But it's the law which sort of prohibits us from carrying out, giving the full, and the risk assessment has also been carried out. But I think it's the law which prohibits us. But I know as far as Dar es Salaam Jamaat is concerned, we have been in contact with them. They have the PPE. They have been trained. They have a good team of doctors there, very professional. So it's a question of I don't think it is there a question of lack of resources or lack of knowledge. They have enough, a large group of doctors. In fact, the largest sort of team of doctors of Khoja community is actually in Dar es Salaam. So it's not an issue of any of this expertise which is lacking. They may have lacked PPE, but I checked, and it seems now they have sorted out the issue of protective personal equipment. So I don't think it is an issue of PPE right now. As far as Mombasa Jamaat is concerned, we are using PPE for all mayats, whether they are COVID deaths or non-COVID deaths, right? Anybody who is a non-COVID death is entitled to a decent ghusl as per the Sharia. But if it's COVID death, then our hands are tied, because that's where the law comes in. Same thing with other Jamaats. In Nairobi Jamaat, I know people have been trained in PPE, so not an issue. They have PPE, enough to look after their members. So it's not a question of lack of PPE. I think what is tying us down in Mombasa is the risk the government thinks we have, the risk what we think we have here, right? Because I think there is a genuine risk. And that is talking out of experience of handling other diseases, Ebola, Rift Valley fever. So we think there is a risk here of getting COVID, because it's a small mistake, right, will lead to a COVID death, a COVID case in a volunteer. Good job by Strathmore, because perfect, but remember, yeah, right? So I mean, I may be teaching them every time when they're donning, doffing, but one mistake and maybe it may be a problem. And that's mistake we learned from other outbreaks. I'm just putting our experience, and I know what the government is thinking of. It's a question of one mistake, and it's an outbreak in the whole community, right? So the government is playing it very cautiously. It doesn't want the infection to spread, right? And concerned, it is the government is being making the full precautions, but there are other communities which have the resources which may. So I think by the government there'll be a bag and Bari is a sensible one because you have just 42 or 52 million, but not all of them have access to professionals. They do not have PPE. So I think it's a government decision. I think it's a decision. We are not Canada or the US where the local authorities can decide. Here, I think it was a central government directive that COVID death should be treated such way, and that was by in caution this issue.
I'll bring it to the reality of the. You are in Vancouver. We had experiences of your in our Jamaat.
In North, local medical professionals in our community risk assessment feel that they're based on a full risk assessment. The potential of having a person doing ghusl being infected and then spreading that to the community, that's the main issue. And that person who's actually doing ghusl may not have many symptoms, or may have minimal symptoms, or may actually have no symptoms, but still be an important carrier. Maybe a young person who is able to handle an infection, but may actually carry that infection to the community. And, in my area where I look after the frail elderly, I think that is a very significant concern. So in general, in have 19 death, COVID-19 death, have taken and they have assessed, they've done a full assessment, and to my knowledge, most of them have gone to option 2 with minimal opening of the bag, doing tayammum, where there is no splashing, there is no increased risk in that way, still tayammum with full PPE, and then sealing the bag, disinfecting, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, all the principles of infection control with physical distancing and so on with the family members. And so I think the feeling of the North American physicians at this time is that the risk is still significant and it's real as far as doing ghusl is concerned. And in the context of doing a very thorough and detailed risk assessment with respect to what the capacity and capabilities are for various communities and the ghusl khanas and so on and so forth. So that's really being, the practical reality on the ground at this time is, after a full risk assessment, we have really gone to option 2 mostly. We do have some places in North America where the body has come to us sealed in a body bag, where we have been explicitly told that you are not to open the bag. And when you have all of these things, and we have actually consulted frontline ICU physicians from our community, who look after, who work in the COVID environment or COVID wards. Myself, who works with the frail elderly, and there are other, like I think Maulana Rizvi talked about emergency physicians as well, who are on the front line. I think we just feel we at this time, we still don't know enough of this virus to be comfortable in allowing full ghusl to be done. So I think that's the reality right now.
Thanks very much for the North American perspective. I'll finally bring in Dr. Kanani for Pakistan. Have you had COVID cases? What has been the Jamaat policy or the Federation's policy in Karachi or in Pakistan?
Right up till now, we haven't had any COVID positive confirmed case with us. As I told you, that the guidelines have been drafted, and on those guidelines, volunteers have been trained, at least 7 groups of volunteers, 5 in each group, two of female and 5 of males have been trained on those guidelines. And right now, they are performing ghusl kafan of all the dead bodies in the same way as they would have performed of a COVID positive body. So this is what we are following at the moment. And we haven't as yet received a single body which just confirmed COVID positive.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kanani. I think this concludes the practical perspectives. Time is of essence. We have probably less than 10 minutes left. And there's one pressing question. I'll bring Sheikh Alidina in, and then I'll ask Rizvi and Sheikh Alidina to summarize spiritual comfort that viewers would need in the event of so much diversity in different regions. And God forbid, if that happens in a region where I cannot get full ghusl, then how do I feel, and what is the spiritual comfort that we can get? But before I come to that, Sheikh Alidina, question is that if there is a shortage of PPE gears in many countries, and this was also alluded earlier by Dr. Mitani as well, what is more important, to use PPE gear by the ghusl kafan team, or to ensure that the PPE is given to the frontline workers at the health authorities? If you are in such a scenario, what is the Sharia responsibility?
This question apparently had been asked some few weeks ago, and therefore we had the opportunity to raise it with the office of Hazrat al-Sistani, Hafidahullah. And their guidance was that if in any particular place the personal protective equipment is required by others, and if there is a serious probability that if there is a shortage, then that would endanger a Muslim's life, then no, tayammum or ghusl is no longer an obligation. But if in other places this shortage is not a risk, then the ghusl or the tayammum obligation must be done with the PPE.
Jazakallah. Maulana, I will ask you to provide some spiritual comfort to Mu'mineen who have been asking about this issue of diversity. If I am living in Africa or in places where the law of the land doesn't allow any of the rituals, or if I'm in a place where authorities feel ghusl is not appropriate, as an individual, as a wali, as a one who has the responsibility, what is that spiritual comfort? Won't I get my ghusl? Don't I deserve a dignified ritual? What is the response to such an individual?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I think we have to realize that extraordinary circumstances call for extraordinary decisions. Even in Sharia, when you look at the various steps that the World Federation Directive has come up based on the guidelines from Ayatollah Sistani, that, Sharia has a provision. Normal situation, you do this. In extraordinary circumstances, you do something else, where the normal, ways of doing things would change. And so we have to keep that in mind. When you look at the taharat, the purity issue, there are 3 methods. Wudu is one, for example, a method of taharat. Ghusl is another. And then we have tayammum. Tayammum also is an absolutely acceptable means of, taharat in its own given situation. So it's not that a person who is doing tayammum, he is lesser in that situation or is not fulfilling his duty. And this is where we have to realize that we go from one step to another. Is first is possible, then you go to second. If not, then third. And if it's not possible, you just go to salat and dafn. And it does not really take away as far as this issue of what we call dignified funeral. Dignified funeral in the perspective of the circumstances that you find yourself. If that is the rule at that time, that is the fatwa, that is the application of the fatwa, you have, as a wali or as an organization, you have fulfilled your duty. Remember, not giving ghusl to a mayyit in this extraordinary circumstances is not really taking away from the dignity of the mayyit. Let me put a very different perspective just to understand this phenomenon of ghusl. What happens to a shaheed? A shaheed, even though the possibilities and facilities for ghusl are there, the Sharia basically says that there will be, they can be buried without ghusl. So ghusl, when it is not given to a shaheed, does not take away from the dignity of the shaheed. So similarly here, because of the extraordinary circumstances, it would be same. I don't think we are denying the mayyit from their rights or putting a funeral in a non-dignified form at all.
Asad Maulana, before I bring Sheikh Alidina to summarize the same question, I would just like to thank all the viewers on Ahl al-Bayt TV who have joined us. There have been a number of questions. The World Federation Islamic Education Board will be available to respond to your questions. The COVID-19 task force of the World Federation is also there to support you. Please send us your questions online and we will get back to you. This program will be available on social media after this broadcast today. And we might continue for 5 more minutes on YouTube if we get cut off for Ahl al-Bayt TV. But Jazakallah, and thank you so much for the Ahl al-Bayt TV for airing this very important program today. Jazakallah. Sheikh Alidina, please.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. If you allow me, I would like to summarize the guidelines based on the opening verses which the Honorable Qari Ma'alim Murtaza Bandali very rightly, aptly chose to recite for us. Ya ayyuhallazina amanu ittaqullah. Believers, you have a duty towards God. Haqqa tuqatih. To the maximum extent possible in all circumstances, ordinary and extraordinary, fulfill your duty. وَلَا تَمُوتُنَّ إِلَّا وَأَنْتُمْ مُسْلِمُونَ. And continuously practice your duty towards God till the end of life. But do not do it individually. وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا. Collectively, as a community, hold on to the rope of God, the book of God, the guidance of the Ahlul Bayt based on the teachings of the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and collectively carry out your duty. وَلْتَكُنْ مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ. And let there be a people amongst you who invite others towards goodness. Alhamdulillah, there are jamaats in our global community who have taken the extra effort to try to see how they can implement God's laws in the different situations. وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And they invite others and share their experiences with others. وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ تَفَرَّقُوا. And all Muslims, don't be like those who got disunited. Everybody made their own interpretations and everybody started accusing the other. No, understand the law of God, get the right guidance, seek the medical expertise, understand your local authorities' facilities, get the guidance from the Maraji, and collectively carry out your duty. But if I am going to do that and then I don't do the ghusl, would that not be undermining the dignity of the mayyit? No, the next ayah says, يَوْمَ تَبْيَضُّ وُجُوهٌ وَتَسْوَدُّ وُجُوهٌ. Remember, there's a day of judgment when some faces will be bright and illuminated and some faces will be dark. because those who understand their duty towards God and those who practice it, they are the ones who will be rewarded with nur and illumination on the day of judgment. So if the community has understood its duty and carried it out, they should be fully confident that God will reward them. And the next ayah says, وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ بِيَضَّتْ وُجُوهُهُمْ فَفِي رَحْمَةِ اللَّهِ هُمْ فِيهَا خَالِدُونَ. Once you've carried out your duty, Allah will reward you with illumination and you will be in the mercy of God permanently. What is important is the mayyit enters into the next world with dignity and purification to the extent possible. If God has allowed tayammum instead of ghusl, then that is a valid act. If no circumstances don't allow tayammum, then yes, that is a valid act. We have performed our duty. We have done our best to give a dignified departure for the mayyit. But most important is the dua for istighfar. Essentially, the whole process of washing the body or cleaning the body by tayammum and shrouding in a clean pieces of clothing and prayers and the dignified burial, all of this is to ensure that the mayyit enters the next world, the world of purity, the world of angels, the world of the holy beings, the ma'asumeen alayhimus salam, in a pure state. And the most important thing for purification is maghfirah. And if, God forbid, none of these physical rituals can be possible, nobody can stop us from istighfar and maghfirah. The hadith says if 40 people attend namaz mayyit, or no, 40 people pray for the istighfar of the mayyit, then even if Allah knows the sins of the individual and others are not aware, Allah, because of the 40 people, 50 people or more who do istighfar, Allah will purify that mayyit. Therefore, in these extraordinary circumstances, it becomes our duty to ensure that we definitely pray for the istighfar for the mayyit, inshaAllah.
Jazakallah khair al-jaza, ahsantum. Respected viewers, we are coming to the end of this program. I want to take the opportunity of thanking all the panelists, Dr. Shana Sharif, Dr. Akbar Mithani, Dr. Hussein Kanani, Dr. Munir Datu, Dr. Sukaina, Maulana Rizvi and Sheikh Alidina for the spiritual guidance, and to the doctors for the medical guidance, and of course our Qari Muallim Murtaza Bhai Bandali for having given us the spiritual upliftment. I just want to end by summarizing in two minutes the program, that it is clear that from a medical perspective, there is diversity of opinion. And that opinion remains there and continues to evolve. There is not much known about the virus. With the developments, things do continue and will continue. The World Federation guidelines are precisely evolving. We started with 2 options. We are now on 5 options. And we continue to seek guidance from His Eminence Ayatollah al-Udama Sayyid Ali Husseini Sistani, together with our reputable scholars, both on this panel and also in the Hawza Ilmiya. We continue to also talk to our medical experts, both in the East and the West, North and the South, to ensure that our Jamaats, our regions, and our Mu'mineen are provided appropriate guidance. The guidelines are there, and inshallah, we will continue to provide you support towards that. I just want to end again on a spiritual note, in line with what Maulana Rizvi and Sheikh Alidina have provided us and the verses of the Quran. And this is again anecdotal from Nahj Balagha, as Amirul Mu'mineen once had, after the Battle of Siffin, as he was on the outskirts of Kufa. This is in Nahj Balagha, saying number 130. He came across a qabristan of scattered graves outside Kufa. And he was with a few companions, and he started talking to the people of the grave. Ya Ahl al-Diyar al-Muhisha wa Qubur al-Muslima, O people of the grave, O people who are living in the loneliness of this grave, O people of the dust. Antum lana faratun sabiq, nahnu lakum taba'un lahiq. You have gone, we are coming. Amma dur faqad sukinat, the houses that you have left behind in this world have been occupied. Ammal amwal faqad qusimat, the wealth that you left behind, the inheritors have taken it. Ammal azwaj faqad nukiya, the wives that you had married have got remarried. This is the news that we give you from this world. What news can you give us from the grave? And then Nahj Balagha says, فَأَلْتَفِتْ إِلَىٰ أَصْحَابِهِ. There was pin drop silence. The companions looked at Amir al-Mu'minin, looked at the companions and said, if Allah had granted strength to the people of the grave, they would say only one thing, anna khayra zadi taqwa. The best provision is taqwa, God cognizance. So we try our best to do the best to achieve taqwa. This is the month of taqwa, the month of Ramadan, la'allakum tattaqun. We do whatever we can based on the guidelines, based on the medical guidelines, based on the guidelines provided by the ulama. But ultimately, it is the taqwa and that weight of taqwa that will count in qabr, inshallah ta'ala. With that, thank you very much. Jazakallah to everybody, to the viewers, to the panelists. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.